Around 106,000 BCE, a creature was discovered by ancient humanity on a small planetoid near the very edge of the galaxy. The creature was found to be hibernating within a stasis capsule of precursor design. The decision was made to move the creature within its capsule to the ancient human capital of Charum Hakor, where effort was made to revive the creature. A time lock or temporal stasis field was placed upon the creature's capsule as a precautionary measure. Despite the advanced nature of the precursor technology, the ancient human researchers led by Precursor managed to find a way to communicate with the being. They would ask it questions in hope of gaining a greater understanding of the mysteries of the universe. In the vast majority of cases, the creature's responses were confused or unintelligible, revealing precious little information to the ancient humans. However, when asked about the nature of the flood, the creature spoke clearly and concisely. The answers it gave to the humans were so paradigm-shattering and so utterly horrific that many of the humans who heard the answer committed suicide. Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00. This is Law and Theory, and today we explore a theory that may reveal what the Primordials said to the ancient humans that was so horrific that many of them killed themselves. The theory was brought to my attention by NonesensicalRants, a member of my Discord server, and it created waves across the server and got a lot of people very interested in the subject at hand. After being inspired by his post, I decided to build on it a little and present it to you for your decisions. These kinds of ideas and theories are very common in my Discord server, and it's full of epic people with awesome ideas about the deeper, darker aspects of Halo lore. So if you're into that kind of stuff, be sure to jump into the server and get involved. Link is in the description. So, what was it that the Primordial told ancient humans that was so terrible, so disgusting that it drove these hyper-advanced humans to commit suicide? Well, in order to answer that, we need to recap on a few aspects of the ancient lore. Our story starts with the Precursors. The Precursors were an ancient, highly advanced race that originated outside of the Milky Way and arrived in the galaxy billions of years ago. They were so advanced that they had achieved the Forerunner technological level of Tier 0 or Transcendent. The beings known as the Precursors arrived in the Milky Way galaxy as creators and caretakers billions of years ago, dreamers and makers whose minds transcended many realms. The Precursors seeded uncountable worlds with the building blocks of life, built cyclopean laboratories made of crystallized reality, forged roads through alternate dimensions to link their great works, and then began a grand experiment to create and uplift new sentient species. Their ultimate goal is unknowable, but the Precursors' actions were guided by the mantle of responsibility, a philosophy and set of ethical rules that compelled them to protect and preserve diversity of life ahead of their own self-interest. Before they vanished, the Precursors reshaped the galaxy with tools of metal, flesh, and energy that were linked across space and time using neural physics, a transcendent science incomprehensible to lesser minds. The Precursors sailed between worlds in vessels guided by knowledge engines, but also walked on star roads, bridges of unbreakable filaments that wove in and out of the deepest layers of slipspace. With boundless intellect and patience, millions of solar systems were re-engineered by the Precursors and populated with what would eventually, after eons of growth, tending, and evolution, become new tools and companions. The Precursors believed that the universe itself was an animate entity on a vastly different scale and nature than organic beings. the very foundation of neural physics. Through understanding and influencing this esoteric living aspect of space-time, the precursors were able to manipulate reality and form virtually indestructible objects. In a notion echoed in the Forerunner concept of living time, they believed that all things experienced by life, good or ill, were only sweetness to the living universe. Consistent with these tenets, the precursors wished to experience the hardships and struggles faced by all life firsthand by committing themselves to numerous cycles of evolution, technological advancement, death, and rebirth over and over again. On a side note, keep in mind that the Forerunners inherited or forcibly stole their beliefs and the mantle of responsibility from the precursors, yet the precursors believed prosperity and suffering were equally acceptable and a sweetness to the living universe, while the Forerunners believed that all life should be protected and experience nothing but peace, even if it was an enforced imperial peace. So keep in mind these differences in their beliefs. When the Forerunners rose up against the precursors, despite being hugely more advanced than the Forerunners and capable of simply moving beyond their reach, they allowed huge swathes of their kind to be exterminated by the Forerunners, because the experience of this hardship and struggle was as important to the living universe as was times of joy and peace. So they served the universe these experiences through their own suffering to further the living universe's experience of existence. Whether they saw this living universe as a separate entity to be somewhat worshipped, or they had advanced to a state that the precursor and living universe were entangled and one and the same thing, or that the precursors were literally a physical manifestation of the living universe, is utterly unclear. But what is clear is that the precursors would do anything necessary to allow the living universe to continue to experience all of life's good and bad aspects. Anything experienced by a consciousness would ultimately benefit the living universe and enrich its experience. Following their defeat at the hands of the Forerunners over 10 million years ago, many of the remaining precursors transmuted themselves into organic particles. They broke themselves down spontaneously into a powder or dust that would reconstitute their original forms, themselves highly variable, at a later time. Over the millions of years that followed the precursors' fall, this powder degraded and became defective. Instead of reforming the precursors as they used to be, it instead resulted in misshapen life forms that ravenously assimilated biomatter they came into contact with, the earliest stages of the flood parasite. The flood eventually evolved into the forms we know of, their biology and method of reproduction making them utterly incompatible with any possible ecosystem. They infect, mutate, and absorb any biomass they come into contact with. The flood selectively targets species that possess sentient intelligence and are of sufficient biomass. Pod infectors use tendrils that pierce the skin of the host and find their way to the spinal cord. They then synchronize with the host's nervous system and gain control of their body. Any useful information present within the memory centers of the host's brain, such as battle strategies and technical knowledge, is retained for use by the flood. Despite this lingering of certain memories, no trace of the original mind remains. Only a simplistic and primal urge to assimilate other species drives the organism after infection. However, the entirety of the host's mental content is seemingly absorbed and added to the whole, as the grave mind has shown to be able to simulate its victim's consciousness within itself. In isolated cases, such as when the flood seek very specific information from an individual's mind, they utilize an alternate method of infestation that does not subdue the host's consciousness immediately, despite mutating their physical form. This allows the flood to burrow into the host's mind, eventually giving them access to the entire scope of the host's memories. This has only been specifically seen when the flood sought information from Captain Jacob Keyes, such as the location of Earth or a starship that could free them from Installation 04. Pursuant to their goals of assimilating life and absorbing knowledge and experience, the flood, in its more coordinated stage, would employ the use of misdirection, lies, deceit, manipulation. It would feign cooperation and work towards common goals, and even fight alongside beings it would normally have consumed or destroyed to further its own ideals. The ultimate endgame of the Flood can thus far only be assumed and speculated upon. However, when you start looking at the Flood as less of a parasite and more like what they actually are, or rather were, and then bring in the variable of the living universe, things begin to make an uncomfortable sense. So when asked about the Flood, what was it that the Primordial, a precursor itself and the herald of the Flood, said to our hyper-advanced ancient ancestors that pushed them to commit suicide? What if the Flood are not corrupted precursors? What if the Flood are the precursors? It is possible that the Flood are not a corrupted form of precursor at all. They are the precursors exactly as they were. It's clear that the precursors and Flood both have many different physical forms. It is clear they both seek the knowledge, consciousness, and experience of life forms. The precursors and their belief and entangled relationship with the living universe may genuinely mean they are simply a physical manifestation of the living universe, a way of the universe as an entity to experience existence directly. When the precursors came to the galaxy, they seeded life on countless worlds, life that would advance and develop and experience. If the Flood and the precursor are the same thing, the return and consumption of all life would integrate that experience, the joys and the suffering of life, into the precursors, and if the precursors are a physical manifestation of the living universe, this would transmit these sweetnesses back to the universe and continue to enrich it. This becomes all the more eerie when you consider these quotes from the Primordial taken from the Forerunner trilogy of books. Work, fight, live, all the sweeter. Mind after mind will shape and absorb. In the end, all will be quiet with wisdom. There is only truth. That which is done will be done again, for we cannot cease from creating. But the end of all our creation will be to look into a reflection and see ourselves for the first time. The pain we have brought on ourselves, the pain you caused us, for we are the same. All remember the defiance and destruction. We are the Flood. There is no difference. Until all space and time are rolled up and life is crushed in the folds, no end to war, grief, or pain. In 101,000 centuries, unity again, and wisdom. Until then, sweetness. My future is your past. Think on it, and accept. That is the answer. The Flood, the precursors, the living universe, they are all the same thing. They are just different names for different stages of a process. The living universe is the ultimate and gave rise to the precursors as a physical manifestation of itself. The precursors seed life within galaxies and allow them to advance and experience. The Flood consume that life and reintegrate that experience back into the living universe. When asked about the Flood, the Primordial told the humans that life, all of existence, is a means of the universe experiencing itself. The universe made the precursors seeded life, the Flood end that life. The universe is enriched as a consequence. Humanity were seeded, nurtured, allowed to advance, built histories, poetry, arts, science, experienced, expanded, raised like cattle to be consumed, and our experiences to be fed to the universe as sustenance, over and over again. They seed us, raise us, leave us to grow, then return to feast upon our knowledge, joy, suffering, experience, and after they've finished digesting the collective information gathered, They store it within their domain, an expression of the living universe itself, wipe the slate clean, and seed life once more. Remember the differences in the ideals of the Forerunners and the Precursors? 10 million years ago, the Forerunners figured it out. They found the Precursor's secret, and they were so disgusted by that discovery, they waged war and slaughtered any they could find. They successfully freed the entire galaxy of the Precursors, and as a safeguard against them, took up the mantle of responsibility and endeavoured to protect all life. To quote the Didact,
"We are Forerunners, guardians of all that exists. The roots of the galaxy have grown deep under our careful tending. Where there is life, the wisdom of our countless generations has saturated the soil. Our strength is a luminous sun towards which all intelligence blossoms, and the impervious shelter beneath which it has prospered."
But wait, I hear you say. We've been told otherwise by both the Primordial and the Gravemind, and even the Forerunners themselves. Yes, while that may be true, the Primordial and the Gravemind are both forms of the Flood, and the Flood are known to lie and manipulate. And they, by transference of property, are also the Precursors, which means it's not surprising that they wouldn't be doing the same. And as for the Forerunners telling that information, the Forerunners forgot their own history over the 10 million years that spanned between them killing the Precursors and the events around the firing of the array. The Forerunners found the truth and destroyed the Precursors to protect all life in the galaxy. Unfortunately, knowledge of this event gradually faded over time. Despite being stored in the domain has a will of its own, and although it is understood to be Precursor in design, the Flood can also access it. So it's reasonable to assume so can the living universe. All the records of these events, these truths, would have been gradually erased, pushed down into the deepest, darkest parts of the domain so that no entity connected to it would ever find it. Lies would be told and offered up in exchange to inaccurately retell the events of the past to better hide the truth. Over the 10 million years that have passed since the Forerunner Precursor War, all knowledge was forgotten, until ancient humanity discovered the Primordial on the edge of the galaxy, and asked it a question that would reveal a truth so horrifying, suicide was a better option. And so, the cycle continues.
No more what you were. Memories. Emotions. All is now ours.
Thanks for watching. Stick your comments down below. I really look forward to what you have to say on this one. Again, big shout out to NonesensicalRants who actually posed this theory in the first instance. And be sure to get over to the Discord to become part of the community where we throw ideas around like this a lot. I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons: Neek the Silent Cartographer, Brian, Sebastian, Red Sea, Darian, Stalker of the Realms, Falcon X003, Alvin, Mr. Fell, Flaming Halo and the Revanche, the Holders of the Mantle, my Glorious Reclaimers, my loyal Metarchs, and all the other patrons that have jumped aboard to support the channel. You guys are awesome, and all this wouldn't be possible without you. If you like Halo lore discussed to insane levels of detail, hit that subscribe button and that little bell icon so you're told the second a new video hits the shelves. Be sure to support us on all major social media channels, including Discord, and if you really love the channel, consider heading over to Patreon and supporting the channel over there. It would mean the world to me, and would free up more of my time for me to put into this content and other Halo-related goodness. Take it easy everyone, and despite the darkness of this video, find peace in the domain.